Hi, everyone. Welcome to Buddhism Talks. So, for today's podcast, I actually wasn't expecting to do this topic, but based on events in my own personal life this week, I decided to look into Buddhism, stress, and what we can do about it. It's been a very interesting couple of days because what it has sparked is questioning, figuring out meaning, figuring out ways forward. And what I ended up doing is looking at an old presentation that I did several years ago on this topic, and then coming across an article about half an hour before I started taping this podcast and coming full circle. So I'm really excited to dive in and start sharing some of the information that I do have, both from the past, from this week in my own experience, and also on an article that I just came across. So let's start at the beginning. So, as many of you know, Buddhism began with Shakyamuni Buddha about 2,500 years ago, wanting to figure out why people suffer and seeing the four sufferings: birth, old age, sickness, and death. And when I first did this presentation, I called this the original curiosity, because it all started with a questioning mind, a seeking mind, and in modern terms, a curious mind. And the reason I called it the original curiosity is because it's a complete juxtaposition to this idea of the original sin. Because in other teachings, this idea of original sin is that we are fundamentally impure. In Buddhism, we are fundamentally pure, or we're fundamentally enlightened. We're actually Buddhas at our core. That's our true identity. We have some layers on top covering that up sometimes, but the core belief is that we are fundamentally enlightened beings. We have an enlightenment at our core. So the amazing thing is that Buddhism began with curiosity. It began with a seeking mind, trying to understand life. That means that to question and to want to understand and to continue to have a curious mind is a fundamental aspect of our practice. With this original curious mind that Shakyamuni Buddha had, he grouped the sufferings into birth, old age, sickness, and death. Technically, those four sufferings can be the causes for modern day stresses and anxieties. The solution in terms of Buddhism was to understand how life works, understand that you have an enlightened nature, and to bring out the four qualities of wisdom, courage, compassion, and life force. And that's what allowed one to transform all of the sufferings into value and growth. So now let's bring it back to 2025. So from Daisaku Ikeda, he says one perspective on stress is that it comes from the nature of the self, the conflict between our sense of being free individuals versus being powerless cogs. It is the stress between excessive expectations and feelings of ultimate powerlessness. So he's saying we inherently know that we have free will. We should actually be able to live independently, have a strong self-identity, be able to direct our lives. We kind of have a sense of that at our core. But then on the other hand, we also have to face the reality and sometimes the experience of feeling like a powerless cog in a machine. And I think in today's society, that's really heightened. I think, a long time ago when you lived on a farm, it was much easier to not feel that you were a powerless cog. I think in the present day society, depending on where you work, the relationships you have, your health, all of that kind of thing, you are often confronted with situations where you can feel like a powerless cog in a machine. So that struggle with the two, that tension of inside knowing you have potential, you really should be living a life where you have a sense of, as a minimum, inner freedom, and then having the experience outside that you don't have freedom. So that causes stress. Those two things can cause a tension in the body. And so next, I want to go to Nichiren Daishonin. He basically goes directly to the solution. So this is in his first writing ever, Attaining Buddhahood in This Lifetime. And actually, this book here. It's a little, there's a lecture. So there's a lecture from Daisaku Ikeda on this first writing of Nichiren Daishonin. I think it's one of the most important lectures for anybody to read, particularly if you just started chanting or practicing Buddhism. And even if you've been chanting for 50 years, I think it's a really great essay and lecture to go back to. A friend of mine in Europe was told to read it 10 times. They said, if you really want to change, you really want to break through your negativity, just read this 10 times. I've managed to read it 6 or 7 times. It does have a lot of great stuff in it. And every time I read it, I highlight something different. So just think about this. So this is Nichiren's first writing. This is the first thing he wants to tell us. And that whole writing is his own introduction to Buddhism. He brings out a lot of core concepts in that writing, but he starts it off with this. He says, if you wish to free yourself from the sufferings of birth and death that you have endured since time without beginning, and to attain without fail unsurpassed enlightenment in this lifetime, you must perceive the mystic truth that is originally inherent in all living beings. This truth is Myoho Renge Kyo. Chanting Myoho Renge Kyo will therefore enable you to grasp the mystic truth innate in all life. So he's basically acknowledging the fact that some of our suffering, even if you don't believe it, sometimes it feels like you have endured it over and over again, and it's deep seated. Like some of our karma or some of our situations just seem like they are embedded in the core of our lives. So he's saying, if you want to free yourself from these cycles of suffering, then you need to recognize your potential. You need to wake up to what you're really made of. And you need to change your perspective. You'll see how all of this is connected, and all of this leads to the same conclusion. So here we have at the very beginning, we have Nichiren Daishonin saying, you need to change how you view your life. You need to wake up. All of this is based on the Lotus Sutra. And so now I want to take us to the imagery of the lotus flower. If you can picture what a lotus flower looks like, and all the photos you've ever seen of a lotus flower, they're white and pristine and they look so beautiful in the water. If you actually looked at the water, though, forget the fancy modernized images of the lotus flower where they've got diamonds and sparkles coming off of them and they're in blue, clean water. They don't grow in blue, clean water. They grow in mud. They grow in very muddy ponds. The image I would use of the lotus flower is the one where it's in the mud and where you like zoom out and you see the mud, because without the mud, there's no lotus flower. It can't grow. It's not going to grow in the blue, clean water in the other fancy photos. It can only grow in the mud. And the mud's important. So what is the muddy pond that it grows in? It's actually the stress and the challenges. That's what it grows out of, is the stress, the anxiety, and the challenges. That's what's in the pond. Now I just want to quickly share a couple of definitions on stress. I always like going back to the meanings of a word. The American Psychiatric Association has an involved definition. It talks about it causing changes to nearly every system of the body. It influences how people feel and behave. It causes mind-body changes, and it reduces the quality of life. So the APA has a pretty comprehensive definition of what it is and how it affects us. And CAMH in Canada, there's an aspect of their definition that I really liked. It says stress is a reaction to a situation. So that's the good news. It's the reaction. And that is the realm where Buddhism and our practice and philosophy and attitude and all of that can help, because all of those things can change our reaction to a situation. So those are just a few modern definitions. And if we go back to the history of the term, it comes from physics, in fact, and it refers to the deformation of a body that has been subjected to external forces. So that's the original sense of what stress is external forces impacting a particular body. And then later, it came to be used to refer to the effect of various pressures on the mental and physical well-being of people. So I think all the definitions resonate on some level. So that's enough about stress and what it is. So what do we do with it? So there's all kinds of suggestions and recommendations, but they all boil down to that this is a moment for creativity. So what do you do when there is incredible levels of stress, so many things out of your control, and you need to come up with a response? And that's what happened to me Wednesday night. I had a couple of weeks of challenges. I had a lot of things all hit the fan all at once, and by Wednesday night I was done. I was sitting in front of my Gohonzon where I chant in tears. And so what is the solution? What do I do? And as I chanted, of course, the solution is I have to do something creative out of this. There's a lot of energy here that I need to transform rather than go into a dark spiral. That came out of my chanting about it. You don't want to live in that place. Sometimes crying is important and it's okay to like break down. But really, those moments are always really great opportunities to refresh. That's what it always feels like for me, especially some of us that are more stubborn than others. Sometimes it really takes life to make you stop and go, what am I doing? What is happening? I clearly need to change something in my life. That becomes the most amazing opportunity to determine to change. Like, I will change this in my life. I will change myself. I will change my response for sure. That's the number one thing is I will change my response. Something is going to shift out of this. That's the beauty of life is like everything can be used for value. So Daisaku Ikeda says, we cannot be paralyzed by despair. Rather than passively accepting things as they are, we must embark on the challenge of creating a new reality. It is in this effort that true, undying hope is to be found. So rather than sink into despair, it was chance to create a new reality. In practice, it is actually exciting. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Like, tears aren't fun and sadness is not fun. I have to say I lived it this week, and that is what came out of all of it. I am going to find a new way forward. And it can all be shifted. And thank you so much for the obstacle. The other thing that Daisaku Ikeda says about stress is this. He says coping successfully with stress requires that we try to see ourselves in a different light. So here we go again. The solution is a change in perspective. It is a change in reaction, and it is an activation of our creativity and of our seeking mind and our curious mind. That's the response. That is the only response that is going to transform anything and alleviate the suffering and add a new petal to the lotus flower. So in the second part, he says, we need a deeper understanding of our truly limitless possibilities as well as our vulnerabilities, and how we can develop our strength as individuals through mutual support. So in that second section, he's clarifying that part of this change in perspective that's required is a recognition of your potential and your strengths, but also embracing your vulnerabilities, understanding like I'm suffering because of this sensitivity or this expectation that wasn't met, or I'm suffering because of, I'm hurt because I was misunderstood. So we have to be kind about our vulnerabilities. But at the same time, part of the shift in perspective is to go, wait a minute, I don't have to spiral down in anxiety and stress, but I can use this as an opportunity to remind myself of who I am, what I'm made of, and that I'm always able to find a new way forward. So the conclusion of all of this is that our response to stress or anxiety must always be a return to our creativity and a return to our curiosity, a return to self-reflection, and recognizing the opportunity, not considering it a failure. The tears or the stress or all of that is really not a failure. It is raw material for opening something new and changing something about ourselves. That shift in us will benefit everybody around us. And I think that's one of the most painful things about when people are in a state of depression, is that they feel completely disconnected and nobody understands their suffering. But we are all connected at all times. So if we can remind ourselves that my personal victory over this situation will affect everybody around me, even though in that moment you feel 100% alone. You feel it is impossible for anybody to understand how much you're suffering. But that's not the truth of life. The truth is that it is really important for you to overcome this, and it is really important for you to make something out of this moment. And if you're able to do that, you're going to be able to encourage so many other people. Like, you basically win for others as well. And another thing to really remind ourselves about is the fact that problems in and of themselves are not problems. The problem is the lack of wisdom and energy and power to transform the problem. And this is where our Buddhist practice comes in, and chanting comes in. And luckily, we have access to that power to be able to transform it. So I mentioned that creativity is part of the response that's necessary. And that creativity can take many different forms. It can be an artistic project. It can be just something new that you're going to be doing, like using your life in a new way. That's creative. And it's really important that when things get dark, the best thing that you can do is do something new. And it can look like anything. It can be a walk in a different park. It can be a book that you've never read. It can be a conversation with somebody new. But that act to do something new is incredibly healthy. And that's not just a Buddhist idea. That shows up in many people's thinking. But fundamentally, it is about creating new life for ourselves. This is from a great speech that was given a long time ago by Daisaku Ikeda to a group of students. And he says, you mustn't for one instant give up your effort to build new lives for yourself. Creativeness means to push open the heavy groaning doorway to life. This is not an easy struggle. Indeed, it may be the most difficult task in the world, for opening the door to your own life is in the end more difficult than opening the door to the mysteries of the universe. And this is what it felt like for me on Wednesday night, when there is this kind of struggle and worry and tension. And then you sit down again and you chant and go, okay, how do I create something new out of this? It is amazing what comes out of your life, and it's incredibly exciting. And you're accessing wisdom, you're reestablishing your goals, and you're recommitting to your life. And he says, even though it's so difficult to open the doors of your own life and to kind of look in and see the things that need to be changed, he says, but when you do it, you vindicate your existence as human beings. At the same time, it makes life worth living for you. I say to you, there's no one lonelier or more unhappy than a person who does not know the pure joy of creating a life for themselves. To be human is not merely to stand erect and manifest intelligence or knowledge. To be human in the full sense of the word is to lead a creative life. It's not just about living a regular common mortal life. It's about understanding that when there are extreme challenges or stresses or anxieties, that this is the time to create something new. And in the world as it is right now, there are just an incredible amount of stresses going on. And so, what does that mean? That means this is the time to really create something new. So those are a few Buddhist principles on stresses, on challenges, on what it means to live a truly creative life. Now, the exciting thing is that there's other things in society that are coming out that are proving and supporting all of this. So one of them is a book that I picked up recently. I haven't read it yet. It's called Beyond Anxiety by Martha Beck. She's saying that rather than getting stuck in an anxiety spiral, the answer is to engage in a creativity spiral. Exact same message. And she's got research that proves that the best way to get out of anxiety and stress spirals is to completely redirect your life into creativity. So this is one aspect. Even this podcast for me is part of doing something creative out of a difficult situation. So the second thing that I'm really excited to talk about is an article that a friend of mine just posted half an hour before this podcast. It's from Big Think, and it is written by a neuroscientist named Laure Le-Cunff. And it is called How Curiosity Rewires Your Brain for Change. And just the opening premise I want to share. She says that the brain often responds to change and uncertainty by activating the amygdala, triggering the same stress response as physical danger. So that's the normal response. However, curiosity helps reframe uncertainty as an invitation, not a threat. So it can completely change the effect of stress on our brain if we are able to activate our curiosity around a situation where we're able to say, what do I do with this? What can I learn from this? How can I change from this? And then she talks about the neuroscience of it. So she's saying that curiosity can actually give us a hit of dopamine. If we can if we can get excited about the chance to learn something new. So, for example, in the middle of the tears, when I said to myself in my chanting, what am I going to do with this? This has got to lead to something good. And so there's an excitement about what's next and what am I going to create out of this? So you even get a dopamine hit doing it this way. She's saying, simply put, curiosity makes us feel good about the prospect of discovering something new. Next, he talks about how curiosity in times of change can also help us with memory resilience, with having a more flexible mind that can handle everything. Then she talks about the impact on two different parts of our brain. So there's one part that's responsible for imagination and introspection. There you go. Self-reflection. Remember, I was talking about self-reflection and about using your imagination to create a new vision for yourself. So it activates that part of your brain. And then it also activates the part that's responsible for goal-oriented behavior. And she says they take turns. So now you've got your brain synchronizing two networks and allowing you to envision possibilities while also taking action. It is the exact balance needed to navigate change. How awesome is that? And another bonus, she's saying that emotionally, curiosity can also act like a buffer. So if we can come at a situation with a place of, what can I learn from this? There could be something new and exciting in all of this, even though it might not feel like it initially. If you can get to the point of, there's got to be something new and exciting in all of this, that will make it less likely that you go into a spiral of anxiety and avoidance. And instead, you're redirected. Again, just like Martha Beck says, you're redirecting to creativity. You're redirecting to growth. You're redirecting all of that into movement forward in a pretty dynamic and exciting way. So she says that curiosity is not a fixed trait. It's not like some people are born curious and others aren't. It's something that you can develop. I mean, some people are more curious than others, but everybody has access to it. Everybody can be more curious. And then she's got 5 ways that you can be more curious and activate that ability. So number 1, always ask what if instead of what now. So what if this is a turning point? What if this is exactly what I needed to change my life? What if there's something great around the corner after this experience? So that's 1. Number 2, take field notes. So she's saying, really notice what's happening in your life. Think about what's happening. Document it, learn from it, be curious about the dynamics of what's going on. So number 3 is run tiny experiments. So she gives a great example. Do you want to switch careers? Well, interview one person every week in various careers that you might be considering. That's something you can do. Make up your own little experiment. If you want to be a writer, we'll start doing some newsletters as a start. So you can come up with your own experiments and just think of just think of the excitement for your brain for you to sit there and go, oh, what could I do new this week? Who could I talk to? Who could I learn from? Where can I go? Can I experience a different environment, a different person, a different book, a different source that I haven't done before? Just think of how refreshing that is to your brain and to your life. The fourth one, she says, embrace not knowing and practice saying, I don't know yet, rather than looking for things that confirm the answer that's in your head already. So maybe you think this is the answer and you're like, oh, I know it's like this. I know myself. I know my life. I know that person. She's saying, no, no. How about you start with, I don't know yet. I'm not sure. Maybe I need to ask some more questions, leaving that kind of openness in your mind. And particularly in a situation and going, I'm not actually going to make a conclusion yet. I will keep my mind open and imagine the kinds of things that can come out if you spend some time on questions rather than looking for things that confirm the answers that you've already decided on. You're battling that attitude of making the decision ahead of time, and what you're being encouraged both by the neuroscience and by Buddhism is to stay open, to question, to self-reflect, and to leave some capacity for something new to happen and for possibilities that you can't envision with your own head. Lately, I've been having discussions with some of my Buddhist friends and talking about the power of setting a goal and chanting about it and then adding the phrase under the best circumstances. So I want to move to England under the best circumstances. And that expression of a goal or a prayer, I think, is really powerful because the one half, you're saying, I want this, right? Your normal, logical, rational mind is saying, I want this. I want this kind of a job, or I want to move, or I want this. And then when you say under the best circumstances, you are leaving an opening for possibilities that you can't figure out with your head. So under the best circumstances means I don't know what the best circumstances are. The timing might be different. The way this happens might be different. Who's involved is going to change. Many dimensions of it might be different. By saying under the best circumstances, you're leaving space for life to do its work, for the universe, for your enlightened nature, all that kind of invisible, profound aspect of life has a place to work when you open up your mind to the possibilities. So when she's talking about exploring questions without rushing to conclusions, she's saying that this allows your brain to do more creative problem solving. And I would say from a faith perspective, as a Buddhist, you allow more opportunity for other possibilities to come in that you wouldn't get to if you were just using your intellectual mind. And the fifth one is to treat failure as a data point. So failure is not failure. It is simply a collection of information. So in terms of the dramas that happen in my life on Wednesday night, it's just data. It's just a collection of information, and it's motivation to change myself and to change my life for my own sake, but also for the sake of others. It's just part of the process. I do not need to spend time thinking of failure and beating myself over the head with my reaction or my behavior, but instead I have so much data that I can learn so much and really make a massive difference in the future. So you can imagine my excitement when I started to do this podcast and I opened up the original presentation. And what does it start with? It starts with this idea of the original curiosity. And what are we ending with? 2025 neuroscience that talks about how curiosity rewires your brain for change. So we've kind of come full circle. I want to end today's podcast with a quote from Tina Turner, and she's talking about the regenerative power of her chanting and of her Buddhist practice and of her life. And she says, "My dear friend David Bowie, who had a lifelong interest in Buddhism, used to call me a phoenix, the mythical bird who rises from the ashes. I believe what he saw in me was none other than the regenerative power of human revolution. The Lotus Sutra's wisdom enabled changes within me that called to mind a phoenix, burning away the old and rising up in the new, casting off the transient and revealing the true." So this is from her book, Happiness Becomes You, page 130. I love this book. It's actually an amazing introduction to Buddhism and an amazing story of her life and her practice. And at the end of her life, she really wanted to do a biography that talked about her spiritual life, which she hadn't done before. The other biographies were all about all the other aspects of her life. And Happiness Becomes You was her tribute to her practice and her spiritual life. And it's just a masterpiece. It really covers all the key concepts of Buddhism. It's a pleasure to read, so I highly recommend it. But back to the point of the whole quote, she elucidates this idea of regeneration so that even when we have stress and anxiety and challenges and devastation and sadness, all those wonderful things, we can regenerate. Like she says, burning away the old and rising up in the new. If we can always look at the situation as an opportunity to learn and create something new, we cut the pain in half, we move forward, and it gets really exciting what we can do with these situations. So I want to thank you for listening today. I wasn't going to do this topic, but I felt that if I was going through this, that maybe somebody could benefit along the way with me. So thank you again for listening. So if there's any topics or subjects you would like covered, please put it in the comments below. I'd be happy to focus on it and put some material together or some interviews on it. So never hesitate to make comments, ask questions, or make suggestions. I'm very happy to have feedback. So thank you again for listening today, and I wish you another great week ahead.